I couldn't shake this nagging feeling that something was off with Linda. It started small, a forced laugh here, a distracted nod there. But as the days went by, I noticed more and more little things that just didn't add up. One evening I came home from a long day at the office to find Linda engrossed in her phone. She barely looked up when I walked in, just mumbled a quick hey before turning back to whatever had captured her attention. I tried to strike up a conversation about my day, but her responses were half-hearted at best. Then there were the phone calls. Linda had always been social, but lately it seemed like she was constantly stepping out of the room to take calls. I'd catch snippets of hushed conversations, abruptly ending when I walked by. I tried to rationalize it all away. We were both under a lot of stress, me with this massive project at work and Linda with her freelance deadlines. It was probably nothing, right? Just two people caught up in their own worlds, temporarily losing touch. But no matter how much I tried to convince myself, that uneasy feeling persisted. Something had changed between us and I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was. So I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off with Linda. Her behavior had been so strange lately, like she was drifting away from me. I tried to tell myself it was just stress, that we were both dealing with a lot, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. One evening, I came home from work, looking forward to our family dinner. It was a tradition we'd kept up for years, a chance for us to reconnect and catch up on each other's lives. But when I walked in, the house was quiet. No smell of cooking, no Linda bustling around the kitchen. I called out, "Linda, you here?" No answer. I checked my phone, wondering if I'd missed a message. There it was, a text from her sent just minutes ago. "Sorry, won't make it to dinner. Work emergency came up. Don't wait up." Well, work emergency. For a part-time graphic design gig, it didn't add up. I stood there in the silent kitchen, feeling a pang of suspicion. But I pushed it down, not wanting to let my mind go there. Maybe she really did have a deadline or a difficult client. I heated up some leftovers and ate alone, trying to ignore the empty chair across from me. As the days went by, Linda's late nights became more frequent. She'd breeze in well after dinner, sometimes close to midnight. Each time, her excuses were vague and hard to pin down. Traffic was awful, she'd say, or Sarah needed help with her kids, or the meeting ran late. I'd nod, pretending to accept these explanations, but inside my unease was growing. I started keeping a mental tally of these incidents, each one a small weight added to the burden of suspicion I was carrying. One night I was in our home office, catching up on some work emails when I heard Linda's phone ring. She answered it in our bedroom, her voice low and hushed. Curious, I moved closer to door, straining to hear. "No, I can't talk long," she whispered, a tender note in her voice that made my stomach clench. Then, a soft laugh, a sound I hadn't heard directed at me in months. It stirred something inside me, a quiet turmoil of emotions I couldn't quite name. I retreated to the office, my mind racing. Who was she talking to? Why the secrecy? I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but something held me back. Maybe I was afraid of what I might find out. The next day, I was at work, trying to focus on a project meeting when my phone buzzed. A text from Linda popped up. "Can't wait to see you later. Miss your smile." For a split second, my heart lifted. It had been so long since she'd sent me something like that. But then another text came through. "Oh God, Tom, ignore that. It was meant for Sarah. We were joking around." My heart sank like a stone. I stared at the messages, reading them over and over. The tenderness in the first text, the hasty explanation in the second. It all felt wrong. So when I got home that evening, Linda was in the kitchen chopping vegetables for dinner. So I stood in the doorway, watching her for a moment. She looked up and smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Hey," I said, my voice sounding strained even to my own ears. "Can we talk about that text from earlier?" This knife paused mid-chop. "What about it?" "I told you it was just a joke with Sarah." I took a deep breath. It didn't seem like a joke, Linda. It seemed intimate. She put down the knife and turned to face me, her expression a mix of exasperation and something else I couldn't quite read. "Tom, come on. Sarah and I have been friends forever. We joke around like that all the time. You're reading too much into it." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to let it go and pretend everything was fine. But the missed dinners, the late nights, the hushed phone calls, it all swirled in my mind, a storm of doubt and fear. "Well, are you sure there's nothing going on?" I asked, hating how vulnerable I sounded. "You've been so distant lately, and I feel like I'm losing you." Linda's face softened for a moment, and I thought I saw a flicker of guilt in her eyes. But then she squared her shoulders and met my gaze. "There's nothing going on, Tom, and I've just been busy and stressed. Maybe we both have been, but I promise there's nothing to worry about." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I wanted to believe her, needed to believe her. But as I watched her turn back to her cooking, a wall of silence falling between us, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in our relationship, and I had no idea how to fix it. I found the receipt in the strangest of ways. I wasn't even looking for anything, just cleaning up, which honestly, Linda usually handled. But things had felt weird lately, so I took it upon myself, mostly to clear my head. Just to do something productive instead of letting the uncertainty gnaw at me. There it was on the dining table, tucked under a pile of unread mail, this crumpled slip of paper from a boutique hotel downtown, a place I knew damn well we hadn't been to together. My mind raced faster than I could stop it, and I tried to keep cool. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Perhaps she was planning something, or it was old. I wanted to believe that. I wanted it so bad I could feel the tension squeezing the back of my neck. I sat with it for a minute, tried to breathe, but when Linda came home later, there was no patience left in me. I asked her outright, and her face shifted, but only for a fraction of a second before it settled back into its usual calm. She smiled, this weird casual smile that didn't fit the situation at all, pulled out the same line about planning some getaway. "Surprise," she said softly, as if it was some sweet gesture. But there was no excitement in her voice, no flicker in her eyes. My gut churned. Weeks went by, and nothing materialized, no mention of the trip, not even when our anniversary passed quietly. Part of me wanted to ask again, get more out of her, but there was something about how she brushed it aside that just exhausted me. How hard the whole charade seemed. I didn't want to admit it, but I felt myself slipping away emotionally, almost without trying. I filled my schedule as much as I could, taking on more projects at work, diving into those pointless late-night email chains that never end. Do anything to keep my mind off the void growing between us. It didn't help. Every time I left the office, every time I pulled into the driveway, that heaviness hit like a weight pressing harder on me. The work, in some twisted way, helped me feel less distracted. At least there was structure to it, an escape I could actually rely on. Linda noticed the change. She had to. But instead of talking, things just got colder. The days became long, awkward silences and lukewarm "how was your days," masking the reality underneath. She barely seemed to notice when I stayed late. Conversations, when they happened, were short, efficient, detached. I signed up for this employee integration retreat a while back, before things turned this sour. But now it felt like the perfect excuse to just get away. Maybe, I thought, with a small, weak hope. Maybe a break like this was what I need, a bit of distance to clear my head. It turned out to be anything but that. I hadn't even gotten through the first night when my stomach started doing flips that shouldn't be physically possible. By morning, I couldn't even stand without feeling like I might collapse. Food poisoning, some undercooked seafood, probably. Funny how much the body could mirror what was happening in my mind. I pulled into the driveway, my head still pounding from the fever that had cut my work retreat short. The house loomed before me, dark and silent. No welcoming lights, no signs of life, just an empty shell of what used to be our home. My hands shook as I fumbled with the keys. The silence inside was deafening. I called out Linda. "Ellie?" My voice echoed through the halls, met only by an eerie stillness. I stumbled into the living room, my vision blurry from exhaustion and illness. That's when I saw her, Ellie, sprawled across the couch, motionless. My heart leapt into my throat. Ellie. I rushed to her, nearly tripping over my own feet. She didn't stir. The acrid smell of alcohol hit me like a wave, and empty bottles littered the floor around her. I shook her gently, then more urgently. "Ellie, wake up." Panic clawed at my chest. This couldn't be happening. Not my little girl. Finally she groaned, her eyelids fluttering. Relief washed over me, quickly replaced by a surge of anger and fear. What the hell had happened? As I helped Ellie sit up, a faint noise caught my attention. It came from the backyard, muffled laughter, hushed voices. "Stay here," I told Ellie, my mind racing. "Drink some water. I'll be right back." I made my way to the back door, my legs unsteady beneath me. The cool night air hit my face as I stepped outside. That's when I saw them. Linda and Kevin. Our neighbor, tangled together on the patio furniture, oblivious to the world around them, to me, to our daughter passed out inside. I stood there frozen. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Everything I thought I knew crumbled away in an instant. "Linda." My voice came out as a hoarse whisper. They sprang apart, startled. Linda's eyes widened in shock, her face pale in the moonlight. "Tom, you're home early." Her voice trembled. Kevin scrambled to his feet, looking everywhere but at me. "I should go," he mumbled. "No." The word came out sharper than I intended. "You stay right there." The air crackled with tension. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. How long? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Linda's eyes filled with tears. Tom, I can explain. How? Long? I repeated, each word like a glass in my throat. 6 months, Kevin blurted out, then winced as Linda shot him a look. 6 months. Half a year of lies and betrayal. While I worried about work, about providing for my family, this had been happening right under my nose. Our daughter is passed out drunk in there, I said, my voice shaking with rage and disbelief. And you're out here like this? Linda's face crumpled. Ellie's what? Is she okay? No thanks to you, I spat. What kind of mother? Don't you dare! Linda's eyes flashed. Don't you put this all on me, Tom. Where have you been? When was the last time you were actually present in this family? Her words hit me like a physical blow. That doesn't justify. No, it doesn't, she cut me off. But it explains it. Do you know how lonely I've been? How invisible I've felt? I shook my head, unable to process her words. So you turned to him. I gestured at Kevin, who looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. Linda's shoulders sagged. He was here, Tom. He listened. He saw me. I see you now, I said, my voice barely audible. I see exactly who you are. The silence that followed was deafening. We stood there, 3 broken people in a backyard that no longer felt like home. Linda took a step towards me, her hand outstretched. Tom, please, we can talk about this. We can fix. I held up a hand, stopping her. No, not now. I need to take care of our daughter, the one you both forgot about while you were out here. I turned and walked back into the house, leaving them in the cold night air. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, anger, betrayal, disbelief. But one thing was clear. Nothing would ever be the same again. The days after that night were strange. The silence in the house wasn't new. It had been slowly creeping in for months, but now it felt thicker, heavier, like it was choking the air, pressing down on me whenever I stood in any room for too long. The kitchen was the worst of it. This space, once filled with the scent of morning coffee or Linda humming to herself as she flipped through recipes, had become a cold void. Linda and I avoided each other, not consciously, but there was just no draw to be near her anymore. Nothing left to say that wouldn't tear the already fragile threads holding together whatever remained. I found myself leaving early and returning late, pretending to be consumed by tasks at work. But, hell, even the office felt less overwhelming than the emptiness of home. The few times I ran into Linda, it felt like walking past a ghost. Her face wore this tired, almost guarded expression, but any attempts to catch my eye were fleeting. We didn't speak unless absolutely necessary. Ellie stuck to her room mostly, avoiding the tension like any sane person would. She kept her headphones on, head bent low in her textbooks, but I could tell she wasn't herself either. The weight of everything was sinking in. I wasn't ready to face it. Who could be? But ignoring it wasn't a long-term solution, and I knew that. Divorce. The word had settled in my mind before I dared say it out loud. But still it sat there, a malignant inevitability, waiting to acknowledge it. There was no point in dragging the farce out any longer, and I knew Linda had to feel the same. No texts or phone calls had come from her since discovering the affair. I think she knew communication would only reopen the floodgates and that I wouldn't be receptive. Maybe she was dreading the conversation as much as I was, or maybe she just didn't care. I didn't know anymore. The thing that broke the silence wasn't dramatic, a sigh, a deep one from across the living room. I sat there, flipping through spreadsheets on my laptop more out of habit than real focus, when Linda ambled into the room. Standing by the window, she looked out into the backyard, probably at the exact spot where everything shattered. Maybe she thought about that night like I did. But the difference was I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every quiet moment, every glance in her direction, it was back, gnawing at me like acid. We need to talk finally came from her. The words felt brittle, like they could break under their own weight. I clicked off the screen and sat back, steeling myself. The moment I'd been avoiding had arrived whether I was ready or not. I knew damn well this was the conversation that would end it all. And for the first time, I didn't have the energy to pretend like something could be salvaged. The room felt unnaturally still, like even the air had been sucked out of it. Linda turned, crossing her arms, but she didn't meet my gaze. Tom, she paused, her breath catching, and I immediately felt the bitterness return. Her voice wasn't what might undo me here. The act of hearing her try to explain this away was what I dreaded most. I'm sorry, I never meant for. Stop! The word left my lips sharper than I expected. I could feel my jaw clenching, the tension between us about to snap. I stood facing her, but refused to let any sign of weakness creep out in my voice. Not now. I don't want to hear it. There's nothing you can say that fixes what you did. Linda's face faltered, her lips parting to speak, but then nothing came. Instead, it was like she braced herself against the verbal onslaught to come, and I didn't hold back anymore. Months, maybe even years, of resentment were unleashed, and all of it work, stress, neglect, whatever the hell excuses she might have had, it didn't matter. Because she chose this, she betrayed everything we'd built. For every apology she tried to offer, I had a response loaded. We were distant, she said. You weren't there for me. I couldn't care less. Every poor decision of hers, every weak justification, just made the cracks spread further. When she mentioned Ellie, something inside me recoiled. Ellie. God, I'd spent so much time protecting her, thinking we were doing all right, and all this shit was brewing under the surface. My chest felt tight as memories of better days flooded in. The three of us, Ellie muddy from soccer practice, Linda's laugh still genuine then. I shut it down as quickly as it surfaced. Anger has a funny way of stopping you from feeling too nostalgic. Linda's tone shifted then, softening. Desperation threading through every vowel. Can't we just fix this? We could try counseling, see if... No, my voice cut through her words like a blade. I didn't want her lingering false hopes. Didn't want a half-hearted journey through therapy that would just prolong the inevitable. I can't do this anymore. We're done. And damn, I meant it. The defeated look on her face surprised me a little. I guess I expected her to fight harder, to insist we work through it out of sheer guilt or remorse. But instead, she sighed again, this quieter, more resigned one. Her shoulders sagged, but she didn't argue. The rest of the conversation couldn't have been more mundane, which I'm sure fits the pattern of a failing marriage. After the emotional storm, there's always paperwork and logistics. We talked arrangements with the clinical efficiency I'd expect from a cold business deal. She would move in with her sister for a bit while we sorted out who would take the house. I'd leave before sundown, grabbing only the essentials for the sake of avoiding more awkward nights under this roof. We agreed Ellie would stay primarily with Linda, though we both still hoped to co-parent. Maybe any decency we had left could be used for that. Packing wasn't hard. Most of the emotion had drained by the time I stepped into her room to throw clothes into a bag, the familiar linen, worn wooden floors. And that same damn wedding photo leaning against the dresser didn't even stir me. It was over. Had been for a long time. As I left, shutting the door behind me, I didn't look back. I couldn't.